Security! We have a vagrant situation that needs immediate removal. Bank manager Patricia Wells pointed at Dr. Jerome Washington like he was diseased refuse. Her voice boomed through First National Bank's marble lobby, designed to humiliate. Boy, the homeless shelter is downtown. You people always get confused about where you belong. She grabbed Jerome's briefcase with latex gloves from her desk, holding it away from her body like toxic waste. I'm not touching whatever diseases this thing carries. Jerome stood frozen as white customers circled closer, some pulling out phones to film the disturbance. A young black woman named Keisha started live streaming from the ATM area. Patricia sprayed hand sanitizer in the air between them. Can everyone else smell that stench? This is exactly why we need better security protocols. Have you ever been publicly degraded so thoroughly that strangers joined in your humiliation for entertainment? 2:47 p.m. Tuesday afternoon. Jerome had exactly 15 minutes before his conference call with the Federal Reserve. Ma'am, I need to make a substantial deposit, he said quietly, reaching for his wallet. I'd like to speak with someone about your private banking services. Patricia's laugh echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Private banking? Boy, do you even know what that means? She turned to the growing crowd. Folks, please be patient while we handle this situation. Branch manager Todd Brennan emerged from his office, took one look at Jerome, and shook his head. Patricia, do you need me to call the police? Not yet, but keep them on speed dial. Patricia's voice carried across the lobby. We're implementing security protocols. Keisha's live stream counter showed 47 viewers and climbing. Comments flooded in. This is disgusting, and call them out. Her stream title read, Bank Discrimination Happening Now. Jerome maintained his composure. I have documentation for a $2.8 million property sale deposit. I need access to $2.8 million? Patricia's voice dripped with mockery. Right. And I'm Oprah Winfrey. She turned to Todd. He claims he has millions to deposit. Todd examined Jerome like a zoo specimen. Sir, do you understand what million means? That's 1,000 thousands. Maybe you meant $28? The security guard approached, hand resting on his radio. Is there a problem here, folks? Just the usual Tuesday entertainment, Patricia announced loudly. She pulled out her phone, staging a fake call. Yes, corporate, we have a situation, typical for this neighborhood. An elderly white woman clutched her purse tighter, whispering to her companion, They always try the nice banks. It's getting worse every year. A businessman in an expensive suit shook his head dismissively. This is exactly why I moved my accounts to Country Club Financial. They know how to handle these people. Jerome's phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Fed Governor Martinez. He declined the call, staying focused. Patricia noticed and smirked. Probably a bill collector. They're persistent with deadbeats. Ma'am, I simply need to access private banking for a legitimate transaction, Jerome repeated. Legitimate? Todd laughed. Sir, your acting isn't convincing anyone here. Do you see anyone else like you in our VIP section? Patricia stepped closer, speaking slower and louder. Do you have an account? Here? Can you even read these signs? She pointed dismissively toward the regular teller windows. I can read perfectly well, Jerome replied evenly. Then read this. Patricia grabbed a no loitering sign and held it inches from his face. LOITERING. That's what you're doing. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording. A mother pulled her child away, whispering loudly, Don't stare, honey. Just ignore it. Keisha's viewer count hit 156. Someone in the comments recognized the location. That's First National on LaSalle Street. Todd consulted a thick policy binder. Sir, we have strict procedures for unusual claims. I'll need 3 forms of ID, a credit report, and verification of funds. For a deposit? Jerome asked. For someone like you making outrageous claims, Patricia snapped. She turned to address the lobby again. Ladies and gentlemen, please form a single line away from this disruption. Jerome showed his driver's license. Patricia barely glanced at it. Those can be faked, you know. We see it all the time. My license is legitimate. Sure it is. She made him spell his name 3 times for clarity, then questioned each letter. Washington? Like the president? How original. The security guard spoke into his radio. Possible 1054 requesting backup if needed. Jerome's phone displayed another incoming call. Deputy Treasury Secretary Office? He declined again. Patricia noticed. More bill collectors? You're popular today. 12 minutes remaining. Sir, are you under the influence of any substances? The security guard asked loudly. You seem confused about basic banking procedures. I'm completely sober, Jerome replied. Todd staged a whispered conversation with Patricia, both glancing at Jerome like concerned doctors discussing a patient. We might need to invoke our discretionary protocols, Todd announced. Patricia nodded gravely. For everyone's safety and comfort. An older gentleman in the VIP section observed the scene. In my day, they knew their place. This integration nonsense has gone too far. Jerome's expensive Rolex caught overhead lighting, a detail only the closest observers noticed. His briefcase bore subtle Federal Reserve markings, invisible unless someone looked carefully. Patricia grabbed hand sanitizer again, spraying it liberally after Jerome moved past. Health protocols, she announced. We can't be too careful. Keisha's live stream gained traction. A local blogger named Sarah Lane tweeted, Witnessing discrimination at First National Bank downtown. This is unacceptable. The businessman pulled out his phone, not to support Jerome, but to record what he saw as entertainment. This'll go viral, he chuckled to his companion. Patricia's voice rose again. Sir, this fantasy needs to stop. You're embarrassing yourself in front of decent people. Jerome met her eyes steadily. And what makes them more decent than me? Her smile turned vicious. Do you really need me to spell it out? Look around. Do you see anyone else like you in our VIP section? 10 minutes remaining. 2:52 p.m. The spectacle grows. The lobby transformed into an arena. 3 white customers openly filmed Jerome while Todd Brennan announced loudly, Ladies and gentlemen, we're implementing enhanced security measures for everyone's protection. Patricia positioned herself like a barrier between Jerome and the VIP banking section. We have a zero-tolerance policy for aggressive panhandlers, she declared, ensuring every word carried across the marble space. The elderly woman who'd clutched her purse earlier stepped forward. Young man, there's a McDonald's hiring down the street. Honest work might suit you better than whatever this is. Her companion nodded approvingly. Some people think the world owes them something. It's a generational problem. Jerome's phone buzzed again. U.S. Treasury Secretary Office appeared on the screen. Patricia noticed and rolled her eyes theatrically. Another robocall trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty? The businessman recording everything laughed. They always think they're important. It's almost sad. 8 minutes remaining. Keisha's live stream viewer count jumped to 312. Comments flooded the screen. Someone call the news! And, this is 2024, not 1954. A user tagged the local NAACP chapter. Sarah Lane arrived with her camera crew from the Chicago Tribune. She began live streaming on her own platform, adding professional credibility to the citizen journalism already capturing everything. Todd consulted his policy manual with exaggerated importance. Sir, according to Section 4.2 of our Customer Conduct Guidelines, disruptive behavior can result in immediate removal and permanent account restrictions. I haven't been disruptive, Jerome said calmly. Your mere presence is disrupting our customers' banking experience, Patricia replied. She gestured toward the crowd. Look at the anxiety you're causing these good people. The security guard stepped closer, speaking loudly into his radio. Control, we have a possible 1054 escalating to 1056. Subject refuses to comply with management directives. Jerome noticed the CCTV cameras positioned throughout the lobby, 12 different angles capturing everything. His expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his posture. A man who understood the value of documentation. Sir, I'm going to need you to empty your pockets, the security guard announced. Standard protocol for potential security threats. Am I under arrest? Jerome asked. Not yet, Todd interjected with menacing emphasis. But that can change quickly if you continue this aggressive behavior. I've been nothing but polite. Patricia laughed mockingly. Polite? You've been harassing our customers with fraudulent claims and refusing to leave when asked. That's not polite. That's criminal behavior. 6 minutes remaining. The businessman approached Todd, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. Manager, I've been banking here 15 years. Are you going to let this individual continue disrupting business? We're handling the situation, Mr. Reynolds, Todd assured him. Corporations have clear guidelines for dealing with undesirable elements. Jerome's briefcase sat on the counter where Patricia had abandoned it with her latex gloves. The Federal Reserve seal was visible to anyone looking closely, but the crowd focused on the spectacle, not the details. A young white couple with children joined the audience. The wife whispered, Should we call the police ourselves? This is getting concerning. Her husband pulled out his phone. I'm recording in case something happens. These situations can get violent quickly. Patricia overheard and nodded approvingly. Excellent thinking. We can't be too careful with unpredictable individuals. 5 minutes remaining. Keisha's stream hit 847 viewers. Someone in the comments identified Patricia. That's Patricia Wells, branch manager. She's got complaints on file with the state banking commissioner. Sarah Lane approached Patricia with her microphone. Ma'am, can you comment on your customer service policies regarding... No media, Patricia snapped. This is a private matter involving a security situation. It's a public lobby, Sarah replied professionally, continuing to film. Todd stepped between them. All media inquiries go through corporate communications. This individual is trespassing and creating a public disturbance. Jerome checked his watch, a custom timepiece with subtle Federal Reserve insignia. Only someone familiar with government watches would recognize the markings. The security guard radioed again. Backup unit, what's your ETA? The situation remains unstable with a growing crowd. Patricia staging another fake call, speaking loudly. Yes, District Attorney's Office. We have a potential fraud situation requiring prosecution. Someone making false financial claims to gain access to restricted areas. The elderly woman's companion stepped forward aggressively. Son, I fought in Vietnam so people like you could have opportunities. Don't waste them on criminal behavior. Jerome met his eyes steadily. Thank you for your service, sir. I respect what you've done for this country. The veteran paused, momentarily disarmed by Jerome's sincerity and obvious education. Patricia quickly intervened. Don't let him manipulate you with fake politeness. They're trained to seem respectable. 4 minutes remaining. Todd produced an official-looking form. Sir, I'm documenting this incident for law enforcement. You've been asked multiple times to leave, refused to comply, and continued making fraudulent claims about substantial deposits. I haven't made any fraudulent claims, Jerome stated quietly. A $2.8 million deposit claim from someone in your circumstances is inherently fraudulent, Todd replied. It's insulting to our intelligence and our legitimate customers. The businessman with the phone laughed. Play the lottery much, buddy? That's probably where the million-dollar dreams come from. Patricia smiled triumphantly. Exactly. Fantasy and reality are different things, and this establishment deals in reality. Jerome's phone buzzed with a text message. The preview showed, Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Meeting prep materials attached. Patricia was standing close enough to see the screen. She snorted dismissively. Federal Reserve? Now you're pretending to work for the government? The delusions just get bigger. 3 minutes remaining. The crowd had swollen to nearly 20 People Bank customers, street observers, and social media followers drawn by the live streams. Some recorded openly, others pretended to check their phones while capturing video. Sarah Lane positioned herself strategically to film Jerome's reactions. Her professional eye caught details others missed. His expensive shoes, the quality leather of his briefcase, his calm demeanor under extreme pressure. A new customer entered the bank, saw the crowd, and immediately joined the spectacle. What's happening here? Bank policy enforcement, Patricia announced proudly. We don't tolerate fraud attempts or aggressive behavior from anyone. Jerome stood in the center of it all, surrounded but not defeated. 20 hostile faces, multiple cameras, social media attention, and a countdown ticking towards something none of them could anticipate. 2 minutes remaining. The security guard's backup arrived, a supervisor who took one look at the scene and shook his head. What's the situation here? Trespassing and attempted fraud, Todd summarized quickly. The subject refuses to leave voluntarily. Jerome finally spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet lobby. I understand you're all just doing your jobs, but are you prepared for the consequences of how you're doing them? Patricia stepped forward aggressively. Are you threatening us? Jerome met her gaze with unsettling calm. Ma'am, I don't make threats. I make assessments. 1 minute remaining. 2:59 p.m. The silence. Jerome Washington opened his briefcase. The crowd pressed closer, expecting to see the pathetic contents of a desperate man's fantasy. Instead, Jerome removed a leather portfolio bearing the official seal of the United States Federal Reserve System. He placed it on the marble counter with deliberate precision. The gold-embossed eagle seemed to gleam under the lobby's crystal chandeliers. Conversations died mid-sentence. Phone cameras zoomed in instinctively. Patricia's triumphant smile flickered like a candle in the wind. Jerome withdrew his official Federal Reserve identification badge, a heavy metal credential with his photograph and title clearly visible. Dr. Jerome Washington, Senior Vice President, Community Reinvestment Act Division. The badge clinked against the counter. The sound echoed in the sudden silence like a judge's gavel. Todd Brennan's policy manual slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a sharp slap. Dr. Washington, Jerome said quietly, his voice carrying clearly across the frozen lobby. Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. I'm here for a compliance evaluation. Patricia's face drained of color so rapidly that several people in the crowd stepped forward, thinking she might collapse. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. The security guard who'd been radioing for backup slowly lowered his hand from his radio, staring at the Federal Reserve credentials as if they might disappear. Jerome opened his iPad with practiced efficiency, revealing the Federal Reserve employee portal with his official photograph and credentials displayed prominently. The screen showed his position on the Community Reinvestment Act enforcement team, the federal division responsible for ensuring banks comply with anti-discrimination laws. The businessman who'd been recording for entertainment slowly lowered his phone, his face pale with dawning comprehension. The elderly veteran who'd lectured Jerome about respect stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, his confident posture crumbling. Sarah Lane's professional instincts kicked in immediately. She adjusted her camera angle to capture both Jerome's credentials and the horrified expressions spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Keisha's live stream exploded. Viewer count jumped from 847 to 3,200 in 30 seconds. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read. Holy shit, he's fed! And they're so done! And bank is absolutely fucked! Someone in the comments identified Jerome. Dr. Jerome Washington. He's the guy who shut down 3 banks in Ohio for discrimination. Jerome placed a second document on the counter. First National Bank's Community Reinvestment Act compliance file. The cover sheet showed a failing grade 2.1 out of 5.0 with a red under Federal Review stamp that seemed to glow under the lobby lights. Patricia tried to speak. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. Her hands shook visibly as she gripped the counter edge. "This institution," Jerome continued in the same calm, professional tone that now carried the weight of federal authority, "serves a community that is 31% minority, yet approves only 7% of minority loan applications." The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. "Your CRA rating is the second lowest in the Chicago Federal Reserve District," he added matter-of-factly. "Out of 47 institutions, you rank 46th. Todd backed away from the counter as if the documents were radioactive. His face had gone from confident authority figure to terrified employee in seconds. A woman from the crowd whispered audibly, "They discriminated against a federal banking regulator." Her companion replied in horror, "They're going to lose their banking license." Jerome opened his laptop with deliberate slowness, revealing a draft Federal Register notice. The header read, "Notice of intent to revoke federal banking charter, First National Bank of Chicago. I was here to conduct an unscheduled compliance evaluation," Jerome explained to the captivated audience. The $2.8 million deposit was a standardized test transaction designed to assess your commitment to equal service regardless of customer appearance or assumptions. He looked directly at Patricia, who stood motionless as a statue. "Ms. Wells, what you've just demonstrated in front of these cameras, this media coverage, and nearly 4,000 live stream viewers is exactly why your bank is failing its federal obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977. The security supervisor who'd arrived as backup stepped further toward the exit, clearly wanting no part of what was unfolding. Jerome's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen clearly displayed, "Janet Foster, Regional Manager, First National Bank, urgent." "That would be your regional manager," Jerome observed mildly. "She's probably watching the live streams like everyone else in corporate." He declined the call and continued organizing his documents with methodical precision. The businessman who'd mocked Jerome's government calls stared in disbelief at Jerome's phone display showing 3 missed calls from the U.S. Treasury Department, 2 from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, and 1 from the FDIC chairman's office. Patricia finally managed to croak, This was all a test?" "It became more than a test when you chose discrimination over professionalism," Jerome replied, his voice carrying a note of disappointment. "My original evaluation was routine compliance monitoring. Your behavior transformed it into a federal civil rights incident with criminal implications." He opened another screen on his iPad, showing First National's complete regulatory profile. $2.3 billion in annual revenue, 847 branches nationwide, $847 million in federal lending programs, and most critically, a banking charter that required renewal within 180 days. "Your institution's charter renewal depends entirely on CRA compliance," Jerome explained to the silent lobby. "Discrimination violations automatically trigger federal investigation under 18 U.S.C. Section 245, which typically results in charter suspension or complete revocation." Todd found enough voice to whisper, "Charter revocation means what exactly?" "Your bank would cease to exist as a legal entity," Jerome confirmed matter-of-factly. "All lending operations were frozen immediately, federal insurance withdrawn. Stock becomes worthless overnight. Approximately 12,000 employees lose their jobs within 30 days. Patricia gripped the counter so tightly, her knuckles went white. Jerome showed them another screen. Real-time stock price alerts. First National's share value had already dropped 6% in the 20 minutes since social media coverage began spreading virally. "The market responds very quickly to news of federal banking investigations," he noted with academic interest. "Institutional investors typically dump bank stocks the moment discrimination lawsuits become public." Sarah Lane stepped forward professionally. Dr. Washington, can you comment on what happens next in this process? That depends entirely on institutional response, Jerome replied, treating her question with the same professional courtesy he'd shown everyone throughout the ordeal. Federal law requires proportional consequences for civil rights violations. The severity depends on whether this represents isolated individual misconduct or systemic discriminatory practices. He gestured toward the CCTV cameras positioned throughout the lobby. Fortunately, we have comprehensive documentation of today's events from multiple independent sources and angles. Federal investigators will review approximately 47 minutes of video evidence from 12 different cameras. Keisha's live stream had reached 8,200 viewers. Local news stations were dispatching crews. The hashtag First National Discrimination was trending across Chicago social media. A new customer walked into the bank, took one look at the crowd of people staring at phones and cameras, and immediately backed toward the exit. Jerome's phone displayed another incoming call. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, direct line. This time, he answered on the second ring. Dr. Washington speaking. Yes, sir, I'm aware of the extensive social media coverage. The evaluation revealed significant CRA violations requiring immediate federal intervention. Understood completely. I'll file the emergency compliance report within the hour and coordinate with the Justice Department. He ended the call and looked at Patricia, who appeared physically ill. Ms. Wells, you asked earlier what makes someone decent. In my professional assessment, decency doesn't depend on skin color, expensive clothing, or assumptions about someone's financial background. It depends on treating every human being with basic respect and dignity. The elderly veteran stepped forward hesitantly, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. Sir, Dr. Washington, I owe you a sincere apology. I was completely wrong. Jerome nodded graciously. Thank you for saying that, sir. That takes real integrity and courage. The mother who'd pulled her child away earlier approached nervously. Doctor, I'm sorry my reaction contributed to this situation. My son should see better examples. Your apology means a great deal, Jerome replied warmly. Children learn from what they observe. Todd attempted damage control. Dr. Washington, surely we can resolve this misunderstanding through proper channels. Mr. Brennan, this isn't a misunderstanding, Jerome interrupted calmly but firmly. This is a documented pattern of discriminatory behavior that violates federal law under multiple statutes. The question isn't whether violations occurred. We have that extensively documented from multiple sources. The question is how your institution chooses to respond. Patricia finally found her voice, though it emerged as barely a whisper. What do you need from us? Jerome closed his laptop and returned his documents to the briefcase that Patricia had handled with latex gloves 30 minutes earlier, the same briefcase she'd treated like contaminated waste. What I need, Ms. Wells, is for you to understand that your choices today didn't just humiliate one person. They jeopardized the livelihoods of 12,000 employees, the financial security of thousands of customers, and the economic stability of communities that depend on this institution. The lobby remained completely silent except for the soft pinging of social media notifications from dozens of phones and the distant sound of news helicopters circling overhead. Jerome picked up his briefcase, the briefcase containing credentials that could destroy their entire institution. I'll be filing my incident report with the Federal Reserve, Justice Department, and FDIC within the hour. Your regional management will receive federal compliance notices by close of business today. The formal investigation begins at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. He walked toward the exit with quiet dignity, passing through the crowd that parted silently before him like water. At the automatic doors, he turned back one final time. Ms. Wells, Mr. Brennan, you have an opportunity to demonstrate that this institution can learn and change. I sincerely recommend you use it wisely. The doors closed behind him, leaving 20 people standing in stunned silence, surrounded by the smoking wreckage of their assumptions and the evidence of their collective moral failure. Patricia stared at the empty counter where Jerome's Federal Reserve credentials had lain, finally understanding she'd just witnessed the end of her career and possibly her entire industry. 3:15 p.m. 16 minutes too late. 3:47 p.m. Emergency response. Janet Foster's helicopter touched down in the bank's parking lot 32 minutes after Jerome Washington walked out. The regional manager emerged with a crisis team of lawyers, PR specialists, and federal compliance officers. Inside the lobby, Patricia Wells sat in a chair someone had brought her, staring blankly at her hands. Todd Brennan paced frantically while fielding calls from corporate headquarters, his voice cracking with each conversation. The live stream audience had swollen to 15,000 viewers across multiple platforms. News vans lined LaSalle Street. Protesters were already gathering with signs reading "Federal Banking Justice" and "Discrimination Costs." Janet Foster burst through the bank's front doors like a woman facing execution. "Where is Dr. Washington?" she demanded. "Gone," Todd stammered. "He left 48 minutes ago, said he'd file his report within the hour." Janet's phone buzzed constantly, board members, shareholders, federal regulators, and media outlets all demanding immediate answers. "Show me exactly what happened," she ordered, pulling up Keisha's viral live stream on her tablet. As the video played, Janet's face grew increasingly pale. Her legal team exchanged worried glances. The bank's stock price continued its free fall, now down 12% and accelerating.
"Jesus Christ, Patricia," Janet whispered. "Do you understand what you've done?"
Patricia looked up with hollow eyes.
"I didn't know." "You didn't know?"
Janet's voice rose dangerously.
"You violated federal civil rights law against the one person in Chicago with the authority to destroy this institution."
4:15 p.m. Federal contact. Janet's phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Jerome Washington, Federal Reserve. She answered immediately, putting it on speaker for her legal team. "Dr. Washington, this is Janet Foster, Regional Manager. I want to personally apologize for—" "Ms. Foster," Jerome's calm voice cut through her panic. "Apologies don't address systemic discrimination. I need to understand whether today's incident represents individual misconduct or institutional culture." "Individual misconduct," Janet said quickly. "Absolutely individual. Patricia Wells acted against all our policies and training." "Your policies," Jerome replied. "Let's discuss those. According to federal records, your institution has received 17 discrimination complaints in the past 18 months. How many resulted in corrective action?" Silence stretched across the speaker. Janet looked desperately at her legal team. "I'll need those files," Jerome continued, "along with employee training records, hiring practices documentation, and loan approval statistics broken down by demographic categories." The bank's chief legal counsel leaned toward the phone. "Dr. Washington, this is Michael Brooks, General Counsel. What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm not proposing anything, Mr. Brooks. I'm documenting federal law violations under 12 CFR Part 25 and 18 U.S.C. Section 245. Your institution has precisely 64 days until charter renewal review. Today's incident automatically triggers a full federal investigation." Janet felt the room spinning. What would it take to avoid charter revocation? "Comprehensive reform," Jerome stated. "Immediate, transparent, and verifiable changes to institutional culture and practices." 4:33 p.m. The ultimatum. Jerome's voice continued with bureaucratic precision. "Here are the non-negotiable federal compliance requirements. First, immediate suspension of all employees involved in today's discrimination, pending full investigation." Patricia whimpered audibly. "Second, implementation of real-time discrimination monitoring systems in all 847 branches within 90 days. Janet scribbled notes frantically. "Third, quarterly mystery shopping programs using diverse testers with results published publicly. Fourth, mandatory bias training for all 12,000 employees, certified by external civil rights organizations."
The legal team exchanged increasingly worried glances. Fifth, establishment of a $2.5 million community investment fund specifically for minority business development in affected communities. $2.5 million? Janet gasped. That's 0.1% of your annual revenue, Ms. Foster. The alternative is complete charter revocation, which would cost approximately $2.3 billion and 12,000 jobs. The mathematics of federal power had never been clearer. Sixth, Jerome continued relentlessly. Implementation of diverse hiring mandates. 50% of management positions were filled by minorities within 18 months, with progress reports filed quarterly with federal regulators. Is that legally possible? Janet asked her lawyers. Under federal compliance orders, yes, Brooks confirmed grimly. Jerome's voice carried no emotion. Seventh, establishment of a federal compliance monitor position. This individual reports directly to the Federal Reserve, not to bank management, and has authority to investigate any discrimination complaints immediately. 4:51 p.m. Public accountability. There are additional requirements, Jerome continued. Public accountability measures. Ms. Wells and Mr. Brennan will participate in a documented apology process, including community meetings and media interviews. Patricia began crying softly. Your institution will fund annual civil rights conferences in Chicago, with mandatory attendance by all management. You'll also establish partnerships with historically black colleges and universities for internship and scholarship programs. Janet calculated rapidly. The financial cost alone would exceed $10 million annually. Finally, Jerome concluded, zero-tolerance enforcement. Any future discrimination incidents result in automatic charter review, regardless of severity. The speaker crackled with silence. Dr. Washington, Janet said carefully, these requirements are extensive. Ms. Foster, discrimination is extensive. Today's incident demonstrates that your institution's culture requires federal intervention to protect civil rights. Chen leaned forward. What's our timeline for response? You have until close of business tomorrow to provide written acceptance of all compliance requirements. Rejection triggers immediate charter revocation proceedings. 5:17 p.m. Internal collapse. After Jerome hung up, the bank's crisis team sat in stunned silence. Patricia was escorted from the building by security, her career ending in the same lobby where it had flourished for 12 years. Todd faced immediate demotion to entry-level teller, salary reduced by 60%, with mandatory retraining and probationary status. Janet addressed her remaining staff. Ladies and gentlemen, this institution has approximately 18 hours to completely restructure its approach to customer service, hiring, lending, and community relations. Stock analysts were already downgrading First National's rating. Local news broadcasts led with the discrimination story. Social media buzzed with calls for boycotts and protests. The bank's customer service director approached Janet nervously. Ma'am, we're receiving hundreds of calls from customers wanting to close their accounts. How many hundreds? Approximately 2,000 in the last hour. Janet closed her eyes. The institutional damage was cascading beyond federal compliance into customer exodus and community boycotts. 6:23 p.m. Media strategy. The bank's PR team struggled to craft a response that didn't admit liability while acknowledging the need for change. We cannot and will not tolerate discrimination of any kind, Janet read from their draft statement. First National Bank is committed to serving all customers with dignity and respect. That sounds like corporate nonsense, Brooks warned. Dr. Washington isn't interested in PR statements. He wants verifiable systemic change. Sarah Lane's Tribune article had gone viral. Federal banking regulator exposes systemic discrimination at First National. The piece included video clips, expert legal analysis, and interviews with civil rights leaders. Community activists were organizing a rally for the next morning. Local NAACP leadership announced plans for a comprehensive investigation of banking practices citywide. Jerome Washington had transformed a single incident of personal discrimination into a federal case study with national implications. 7:45 p.m. The decision. Janet convened an emergency board meeting via conference call. 12 board members from across the country joined to discuss the institution's survival. The federal compliance costs will exceed $50 million over 3 years, the CFO reported, but charter revocation would cost $2.3 billion and eliminate the company entirely. "What's our choice?" asked the board chairman. "We don't have one," Janet replied. "We comply completely or we cease to exist." The vote was unanimous, full acceptance of federal requirements. At 8:47 p.m., Janet Foster sent a formal letter to Dr. Jerome Washington accepting every compliance requirement without modification. The bank that had treated him like human garbage was now completely subject to his federal authority. Jerome had achieved something remarkable. He'd transformed personal humiliation into institutional reform, individual discrimination into systematic change, and corporate arrogance into federal compliance. By close of business, First National Bank existed only at the pleasure of the man they'd tried to have arrested for trespassing. The power had shifted completely. 3 months later, systematic change. The First National Bank lobby looked identical but felt completely different. A diverse staff of tellers served customers with genuine courtesy. Mandatory bias training had replaced casual discrimination with professional respect. Patricia Wells worked as a customer service representative at a credit union in suburban Milwaukee, her banking career effectively over. The viral video of her discriminatory behavior followed her everywhere, a permanent digital record of choices that destroyed her professional reputation. Todd Brennan, now a probationary teller, processed routine deposits under the supervision of managers who'd been hired specifically to prevent discrimination. His salary barely covered his mortgage, a daily reminder of how quickly authority could vanish. The security guard who'd eagerly participated in Jerome's humiliation had been terminated from the banking industry entirely, his discriminatory conduct documented in federal records that prevented future employment at financial institutions. Federal Oversight Implementation. Dr. Jerome Washington reviewed quarterly compliance reports from his Federal Reserve Office. First National had exceeded every requirement he'd mandated. The $2.5 million Community Investment Fund had approved 847 minority business loans in 3 months. The diversity hiring mandate was ahead of schedule. 52% of new management positions had gone to qualified minority candidates. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement in workplace culture. Mystery shopper programs revealed consistent professional service regardless of customer appearance, race, or perceived economic status. The discrimination hotline had received 0 verified complaints since implementation. Most significantly, First National's Community Reinvestment Act rating had improved from 2.1 to 4.2 out of 5.0, the largest federal compliance improvement in Chicago banking history. Personal transformations. The elderly veteran who'd lectured Jerome about respect had become an unlikely advocate. He attended community meetings, sharing his own story of prejudice and change. "I was wrong about a man's character based on his appearance," he told the audience. "Age doesn't excuse ignorance." Keisha parlayed her viral live stream into a full scholarship to Northwestern University, where she studied civil rights law. She credited Jerome's quiet dignity under pressure as inspiration for her career choice. Sarah Lane's Tribune coverage earned her a Pulitzer Prize nomination for public service journalism. Her follow-up articles documented similar discrimination patterns at other financial institutions, leading to federal investigations nationwide. Economic impact. First National stock had recovered and actually risen above pre-incident levels. Investors recognized that federal compliance reduced legal risks, while diverse hiring improved community relationships and customer satisfaction. The bank's quarterly earnings report showed increased deposits from minority customers who appreciated the visible commitment to equal service. Community partnerships generated new business relationships worth millions annually. Other banks proactively implemented similar reforms to avoid federal scrutiny, creating an industry-wide improvement in minority banking services across Chicago. Institutional learning. The bank's annual Civil Rights Conference attracted financial institutions from across the Midwest. Jerome served as keynote speaker, addressing 200 banking professionals about the business case for dignified customer service. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, he told the audience. It's economically stupid. Today's humiliated customer might be tomorrow's major depositor, business partner, or federal regulator. First National's training program became a model for federal compliance, with other banks requesting access to their curriculum and procedures. Justice served. The transformation satisfied Jerome's goals more completely than punishment ever could. Individual consequences had been swift and appropriate. Patricia unemployed, Todd demoted, security guard banned from the industry. But systematic change would protect thousands of future customers from similar discrimination. Every policy revision, every training session, every compliance report represented dignity restored not just for Jerome, but for countless people who would never experience what he had endured. Community recognition. The Chicago NAACP awarded Jerome their Presidential Medal for advancing civil rights through institutional reform. Local business leaders recognized him as Executive of the Year for demonstrating how federal authority could create positive change. His calm, professional response to discrimination had become a case study in law schools nationwide. Students learned how preparation, documentation, and systematic thinking could achieve more lasting change than anger or confrontation. Personal reflection. Jerome still conducted compliance evaluations, but banks across the district knew his reputation. Discriminatory incidents became virtually non-existent, not from fear alone, but from genuine cultural change. He kept the original video of Patricia's discriminatory behavior in his files, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that individual dignity matters and institutional power carries responsibility. The briefcase she'd handled with latex gloves now contained commendation letters from community organizations, federal recognition awards, and thank you notes from customers who'd experienced improved service thanks to the reforms his courage had created. Lasting impact. 3 months after the incident, First National Bank had become the most compliant financial institution in the Federal Reserve's Chicago district. Their customer satisfaction ratings reached record highs. Employee retention improved dramatically. The story demonstrated that dignity didn't require violence, revenge didn't require anger, and justice could be achieved through systems designed to protect civil rights. Jerome Washington had transformed personal humiliation into institutional reform, proving that one person's courage and preparation could create lasting change for entire communities. The power of quiet dignity had triumphed completely. 1 year later. Legacy of change. Dr. Jerome Washington received the Federal Banking Service Medal of Honor from the Chairman of the Federal Reserve. His quiet professionalism under extreme discrimination had created the most comprehensive banking reform in decades. The Washington Protocol became standard federal procedure for handling discrimination incidents. Banking regulators nationwide adopted his systematic approach. Document everything, apply existing law precisely, and focus on institutional change rather than personal revenge. Patricia Wells now worked part-time at a community college, teaching customer service classes. Her own experience with the consequences of discrimination had transformed her into an advocate for respectful treatment of all people. She often told her students, "One moment of prejudice destroyed my entire career. Choose dignity instead." Todd Brennan completed his federal probation and worked his way back into management, but at a different institution. He became known for zero-tolerance policies toward discrimination and frequently referenced, "The day I learned what real authority looks like." National impact. The viral video had been viewed 47 million times across all platforms. Civil rights organizations used it in training programs. Business schools taught case studies based on Jerome's strategic response to institutional discrimination. 15 major banks proactively reformed their policies after seeing First National's compliance requirements. The threat of federal intervention proved more effective than decades of voluntary diversity initiatives. Banking discrimination complaints dropped 34% nationally as institutions recognized that discriminatory behavior carried career-ending consequences and federal oversight. Personal transformation stories. These real-life stories of courage and systematic change resonated far beyond banking. Jerome's approach inspired people facing discrimination in healthcare, retail, education, and employment to document incidents, understand their rights, and pursue institutional rather than personal remedies. The elderly veteran became a regular speaker at diversity conferences, sharing how one conversation changed his perspective on respect and dignity. His story showed that growth was possible at any age. Keisha graduated law school and joined the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, specializing in institutional discrimination cases. She credited Jerome's example of quiet strength under pressure as her career inspiration. Continuing mission. Jerome continued his federal compliance work, but discrimination incidents became increasingly rare in his district. His reputation preceded him. Banks ensured equal treatment, knowing that federal oversight was both swift and comprehensive. He spoke regularly at universities and corporate conferences, sharing the touching stories of how preparation, professionalism, and systematic thinking could overcome any form of prejudice. His message remained consistent. Dignity doesn't require anyone else's permission. Respect yourself enough to demand it from institutions designed to serve you. The broader lesson. This story demonstrates that Black stories of triumph come not from anger or violence, but from intelligence, preparation, and strategic use of existing systems designed to protect civil rights. Life stories like Jerome's prove that one person's courage can transform entire industries when they combine personal dignity with institutional knowledge. These touching stories remind us that justice achieved through systematic change protects not just the individual who stands up, but countless future people who will benefit from reformed institutions. Call to action. If you've experienced discrimination in banking, retail, healthcare, or any professional setting, your story has power. Share your experience in the comments below. Your voice could help others recognize discrimination and understand their rights to equal treatment. Subscribe to Black Tales Stories for more inspiring accounts of ordinary people using extraordinary intelligence and preparation to create lasting systemic change through courage and strategic thinking. Share this video if you believe everyone deserves respect and equal treatment regardless of appearance, assumptions, or background. Let's make discrimination too expensive and embarrassing for institutions to maintain. Together, we can ensure that dignity and respect become the standard, not the exception, in every interaction.